What Little J and Because offers is a very distinct Australian voice.
See how beautiful country is?
Young children watch this and go, oh my goodness, this is Australia, this is the land I live in.
What are we going to wear to school now?
I'm Croc Warrior.
Oh, you mob deadly.
Keep up, little fella.
With the second series of Little J and Because, we went to a lot of places that you won't often see on children's television.
Following Little J and his cousin Because, who live with their nana, we recorded the show in Indigenous languages as well.
Kids see the landscape and they've never seen that landscape in a cartoon before.
My kids love this show.
Indigenous kids and non-Indigenous kids are watching this and they feel that it speaks to them.
At the heart of it is passing on stories.
There's a lot going on in the Australian children's content landscape at the moment, including the government's recent decision to abolish the commercial network's children's quota, the growing dominance of the streaming platforms and the shrinking ABC funds. These are very real challenges for our industry and they will be discussed across Screen Forever. However, in our session, we're going to look at the strengths and the success of the Australian children's content production, most of which is produced by small independent production companies like mine. We have built an industry that is both local and export market focused, producing content that is embraced by our global audience. We are the most profitable subsector of the Australian production industry. You could say we are the quiet achievers. Today, we are here to discuss how good Aussie Kids programs are with three incredible women who are leading the world in children's content. So let me introduce you to our panel. First of all, Deidre Brennan. Deirdre is Executive Vice President of Content Partnerships at Wildbrain in Canada. Based in Toronto. Hi, Dee. Let me do my spiel. Based in Toronto, Deirdre oversees the company's global distribution business, as well as its suite of family branded broadcast channels. Prior to this, Deirdre worked at NBC Universal in New York City as General Manager of Universal Kids. So hi, Dee.
Hello.
Jessica Ellis is the Head of Content Sales and Distribution at ABC Commercial, where she is responsible for ABC screen content, services and brands to the global marketplace. Prior to Jess's 14 years at the ABC, she worked in drama investment at Screen Australia and in sales for BBC Worldwide. Hi, Jess.
Hello.
And Jane Gould serves as Senior Vice President, Consumer Insights and Programming Strategy at Disney. Based in Los Angeles, Jane not only oversees consumer insight and research, but she is responsible for all televised programming across the Disney's multi-platform kids TV brands. Ooh, that's a mouthful.
Woohoo!
Hi, Jane. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today. So let's start with a little icebreaker. Tell me what your favourite Aussie Kids show is, whether it's something from your childhood or something from today. Jess, do you want to start?
Well, I know this is probably a bit cliche, but it really, for me, has to be Play School. I think from, as a consumer many years ago, there's not many 50-year-old brands that are still standing the test of time and still resonating so much with Australian audiences. It's educational, it's entertaining, it's creative, and it's 30 minutes. And there's not many 30-minute formats that still work on broadcast linear. So we're delighted that we're representing Play School here, but soon also we'll be representing the international rights as well, and really hoping to take Play School to the global audiences as successfully as we have done here.
Fantastic. It is. It's an icon. It's an icon. We all grew up with it.
Yeah.
Deirdre, how about you?
And totally agree about Play School. Just that reinvention of a classic hit, and fascinating because it was actually a British format. but
Well,
it
that's
is
right.
a beloved Australian program because it's good. It's fantastic. For me, I have a couple because I'm greedy with time. So Bluey is just so beloved by everybody, even if we don't have the show. Congratulations, Jane, bravo for making that an international hit, because it has a truly authentic voice. Couldn't come from anywhere else in the world. But a couple of little other favorites, Little Lunch, because it's an amazing example of pulling talent in from other different parts of the industry to tell stories for kids and families. Round the Twist, you have to say, because it was the first global hit. And I have a soft spot, obviously, for Nowhere Boys, because it just pushed a genre that was totally unique. Yet again, it was a program that could only have been made in Australia.
I'm glad I got to go last, because excellent choices.
They're all great ones.
And I could spend all day on this topic, and I know this is meant to be the icebreaker. So I promise I'll move forward. But everything you've said, but I jotted down H2O because my kids range between 8 and 15, and I have watched that series with all of them, and they all come and watch it every time, and it's just proof of the power of the storytelling that is in that particular piece. And for me personally, I had to do a throwback to Heartbreak High, because
another good one. Yes. Agree.
It's a classic. Look, for me, I would say Little Lunch is right up there. It's a show that's so beautifully crafted. Amazing, the kids, the way they're acting in it is just fantastic and beautifully written. So that's probably one of my favorites.
And so funny, humor. The humor in that is just
so funny,
brilliant. Yeah, really great.
Yeah, super clever. So our kids shows do travel far and wide, and we're a small industry that tends to punch above its weight. Do you think there's something about Australian children's content that you feel makes us stand out? Is there something that particularly appeals? Jane, what do you think?
I loved thinking about this, because this is the heart of it. And for me, I've oversimplified it with 2 words, but for me is this sense of a bold innocence. And the combination of both of those things is just captivating. It's so deeply relatable, yet unexpected, that I always feel welcome on the journey, but I know I'm being taken to places I've never imagined, with people like that are living the best life that I would hope to be living. So for me, bold innocence is really what speaks to this.
I'm glad you recorded that, because I'm going to use it. I always write down what Jane says, because it's just brilliant.
I have also written down bold innocence. I just say here on my notes.
I'm going to use it. I think from the production side too, from people like you, Donna, you are the consummate all-rounders. You also love travel. So, there may have been a motivation of necessity to get funding for shows, which is why this all started in the first place. But the thing is, I do think you tell stories, as Dad said, that are totally globally relevant and relatable. Because in Australia, everybody grew up with a mix of shows. So no one in Australia says that Sesame Street or Degrassi doesn't have a part of our cultural history. So you just naturally became storytellers that resonate around the world. I think it's fantastic.
Oh, that's such a great comment. Thanks, Dee. Jess, do you have any thoughts?
I agree completely with everyone's comments. I think the other thing I find is that we're not afraid to explore the genres. So it might be a light entertainment show / comedy. It might be a factual entertainment show, a scripted show, and I think that's what we're finding is it's bold, but we're not afraid to take the risks and to explore different genres in that kids space.
Yeah, it's exciting to be daring and push the boundaries, whether that's in comedy or drama or sci-fi. Deirdre mentioned Nowhere Boys.
And if I could be so bold as to jump in on that, there's this lack of fear in that storytelling, but in an age-appropriate way, because so often it's a simpler but ineffective solution to age it up in the risk-taking to make it feel bolder when you lose the audience by pushing it. And I think there's something magical in this ability to push those boundaries in such a deeply age-appropriate way.
Deirdre, can we talk a little bit about Wildbrain and co-productions? So your company co-produces with companies from all around the world, and you have co-produced with Australia, shows like The Deep and Dirt Girl World. And why do you think it is that Wildbrain looks, and indeed other companies, looks to Australia to co-produce? And what is it you look for in a co-production partner?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I can't take the credit for great shows that DHX and Deco were involved with. And I have to say, Wildbrain, since a year and a half, we formed a new identity and a new way of working. It is different now. I'm going to be very honest. I think the motivation for any international company that I've had the privilege of working for working with Australian production, whether it's original IP or IP that we bring to the partnership, the motivation is always subsidies and quotas and commissioning partners and investment that is associated with that. That's how the conversation starts. But I think all of us have seen over the years, you know, this turns in and evolves into a creative-based partnership that lasts well beyond one show, usually. So I think it's a combination of opening the door, but then realizing the creative talent. And for me, I'd always like to promote Australia as being a source of great ideas and world-class execution. So you combine those two, and you do have a great opportunity. But to get people to sit up and take notice, it does start with that subsidy support.
So you feel like it is the combination of what we can bring to the table on a project as well as the project.
Yes, I'm being very honest about it. Yes, I do think once you get to show the level of skill and creativity you can bring to projects, then it becomes a different conversation. But it also depends which filter you look through. So for me, with my distribution hat on, we want to be able to support Australian productions in any way that we can, not just co-production. So, you know, I think if you look at the great successes internationally, a lot of them came from distribution support and advocates in the international market, not necessarily co-production, which is something to take into consideration. TV, from the family network perspective, it's a little bit more challenging because sometimes it's hard to convince people that shows can actually work if they give them a chance. And that's why the hits like Bluey and what Jane has done is so important, because people say, actually, this is really unique content. And that opens the door for both acquisition and co-production conversations.
From an Australian producer's perspective, co-productions are sort of integral to a lot of what we do. Not everyone does them all the time, and certainly the last show we made wasn't a co-pro, but a significant proportion are. And building those relationships internationally is key to that, as well as having access, as you say, to those subsidies. We can talk a little bit more about offsets in a little while, but it's good to hear you say that is an important part. Jess, can we talk about ABC commercial for a minute?
Yes.
You distribute those Aussie icons like the Wiggles and Bananas in Pajamas. And more recently, you've been distributing Itch, which is a fantastic sort of tween teen drama. So you cover the spectrum from preschool through to teenagers. And you're dealing with content buyers from all around the world. Why do you think they come to ABC commercial, or indeed to Australia, to look for kids content? And what do you think, what sort of kids series are travelling well from your perspective?
I think, you know, we're very lucky. You talked about Australian content punching above its weight, but ABC Children certainly does that, and they're at the forefront of that. So buyers and the industry looks to the ABC and ABC Children's to see what's coming through the pipeline. So we're very blessed to be representing that content in the market. Really what we've found over the last 12 months is, you know, diversity in cast is really important. And I think you'll hear a lot about that at Screen Forever, diversity targets. You know, there's a real focus on that for the ABC, which is fantastic. You know, fun through learning. It's educational, but it's entertaining. So there's some fantastic ABC Me programs, how to do stuff good, advice for my 12-year-old self. They're just the gift that keeps on giving. Broadcasters and buyers around the world are just loving that kind of content. Music is a huge theme for us. The Wiggles do it so well. We've just launched Teeny Tiny Stevies into the market. It really is that kind of sort of lean back, enjoy, watch the kids dancing. It's just fabulous. And the Wiggles, 30 years this year for them, a big year. But just a delight to continue to represent in the market, all led through music. A really interesting one that came about last year was reinventing a catalyst format. So it was the Greatest Bee Challenge, an episode on the ABC. We reinvented that into a kids format, and so have just done a deal with the BBC. So you'll see I think it's how to do stuff honey or something, really beautiful little kids format.
Great.
So things like that, like really just trying to reinvent amazing IP through the ABC into kids formats, and that's been hugely successful. And I think just also a diverse range of durations. We've got really, really short form interstitial content that can fit really well and sprinkle throughout schedules, but also then the hard hitting 30 minutes. So I think for us, having an itch, which is, a bit longer format, having, a Justine Clark interstitial for broadcasters, just having that flexible offer for the market in terms of duration has been really beneficial for us over the last 12 months as the world has sort of turned upside down in terms of production. So that's been a huge benefit to us.
You mentioned diversity and cast, Deirdre and Jane. I can only imagine that this is the forefront of decisions that you're making as well.
Why wouldn't we want to represent the audience that we serve? It's just making sure that we do that in every part of the business and what we do.
Yeah, jumping in on that, if by choosing not to represent your audience, you're making a statement. And I know some people say that there's statements being made about representation, but like I said, if we're just representing our audience, we're doing a really good job, and we all have a lot to do in terms of representing them and making our diversity even more diverse, right? There is so much ground for us to catch up on, for our audience to feel seen and heard.
Yeah, in an authentic way, which I think is the challenge, isn't it? I mean, how do you just represent in a very authentic way, and that is a challenge for a lot of kids producers and creators, I think.
It's a challenge, but it's also exciting because it's stories coming from a whole mix of places, and how great is that we're working together to get these stories out there.
Yeah, diversity of thought, experience, environment. There's so much we can do. I agree.
The other thing you mentioned, Jess, was the durations that you're working, or you're having success with a mix of sort of durations these days. And I'm interested, Jane, from Disney's perspective, do you look at the mix of durations, or are you quite set in what you're looking for in that area?
Yeah, I would say that even in the last 2 years, that's changed, where, it was difficult for us in a linear space to rearrange days and times, right? There's only so many hours in the clock, and it was challenging to get the math right. And we have found a path to more flexibility, which I'm really excited about, because good stories come in all shapes and sizes, and we should find room for them both in linear and in the non-linear platforms.
So Jane, while we're talking about things, go on, sorry.
I was about to say Bluey is a good example of that.
And that's just what I was going to segue into. Is Bluey, that everyone loves. It's safe to say it is a worldwide phenomenon now. Can you tell us what appealed in Bluey to Disney? And did you want to see it a success here in Australia first before you considered it, or is that just how it evolved?
Yeah. Look, there were so many people involved in the Disney world around Bluey, and I'm grateful to every one of them that made this happen, and obviously to our partners with BBC and ABC. So a big thanks to everybody who allowed this to progress the way we wanted it to. I think that the quick answer around what is it around Bluey is that everyone who sees that show and those characters sees a piece of their family. And it's just an instant emotional pull. And one of the things we talk about at Disney all the time is provoking an emotion. And man, there's not a moment that goes by where you're not provoked into an emotional reaction to this piece. And it is that play on family, that it's a loving, caring, but humorous and playful family that just stood out. So that's to answer the first piece of it. I could go on. There are many other reasons, but that's certainly the front door to it. And I think in terms of were we waiting to see, I can only speak to my connection with it. And I first saw Bluey. I know many others saw it earlier, but I first saw Bluey at MIP Junior. And my head exploded a little bit. I was like, what is this? And how can we have it? And for me, it was just a marathon sprint after seeing it to try and secure it. So that's the simple version of my part of this story, is how I saw it and how long it took to get it.
I think originally it was first pitched at the Asian Animation Summit.
Correct,
it
yeah.
has to be their biggest success story, I guess. But yeah, it was first presented, I believe it was first presented there. It's had a phenomenal ride since that point in time.
It's a wonderful example, though, of someone, Jane. That's why my sincere congratulations for being an advocate within a very large, complex organisation where, you know, that just to have natural Australian voices would not be something that people would consider. And I can only imagine how hard you fought to keep that show exactly the way it is. And, you know, the success is so well deserved to everyone who was involved in it. So congratulations.
Yeah, you make a really good point around the accents, for sure. And that was one of the first questions I was asked as an Australian, bringing it back, to an American base of, are they really going to understand what they're saying? All those classic questions popped up that we've heard and asked ourselves over the years. And I have to offer my gratitude to YouTube, because YouTube has brought accents into kids' ears in ways that linear television never did. And it meant, it has meant that there's just, all those barriers just aren't there anymore that used to be there. So that was a really wonderful surprise. We did jump in straight away and research it and ask very specific questions around accents. And I think what was really surprising to a lot of the executives at Disney was that 80% of the preschool audience said it was easy to understand, which is what they would say for any show, right? They can get confused very quickly, not just because of accents. But also that around 60% of them said that hearing the accent made it more appealing to them. And only 8% of kids said that made it less appealing. It's such a flip from where it was 10, cool. 15 years ago.
Yeah. Donna, I was going to ask you, do you think that the nature of VOD content too has also done this? When you think of Netflix and the breadth of international production they're now bringing to audiences that not normally see it within traditional linear formats. I imagine, at one end of the scale in the SVOD world, and then free VOD with YouTube or AVOD with YouTube are both helping.
Definitely. I mean, I'm sure you can see it across your career. I certainly can, having been pitching and producing Australian shows for a long time. I've been told over the years, your accents don't travel, Australian accent doesn't travel. But in fact, we've always sort of had shows that have broken through, shows like Dance Academy and The Wiggles, 30 years. Jess, 30 years.
Yep, 30.
So we have always had those shows that break through. But broadly speaking, I definitely think the SVODs and YouTube, as Jane says, has opened that up for us, and it's a really important issue. The UK has been more accepting of the Australian accent over the years, but certainly North America has been tough to crack on that front. So hooray for Bluey, and that's fantastic. And I think we all know personally that kids are accepting of accents more than adults. And as the decisions are made by adults, sometimes it takes us a little while to catch up to what the kids are thinking.
And I wonder whether in your research, Jane, that the parents were asked those sort of questions and what their initial feedback might have been as opposed to what you're now seeing now that it's been on air for some time. Like I do get sometimes cracking that adult market is tougher. And we see that even in our sales tool, you know, scripted and factual content, the accents can be more problematic than the kids' content, which I find interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you will find much more resistance from an older audience on any topic.
Hopefully we'll see that shift a bit again as these global streaming platforms, you know, are sharing their Danish indie dramas and that it's just becoming more the norm. I'd like to,
and we
hear
don't need
the
subtitles
Aussie accents everywhere.
Yes, we don't need subtitles.
Yeah, we don't need subtitles. Thank you very much.
No, not for most people anyway.
I have been that an executive suggested that to me and I just sat there. Yeah, Jane's not
Rude.
It's like,
I
so
still have people
rude.
stop in meetings and ask someone to explain what I just said. Like, what did she just say? I'm like, okay.
Well, let's shift away from the good old SVODs at the moment and have a chat about licensing and merchandise, consumer products. So it's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that we all hope to achieve. Jane and Deirdre, I guess, and Deirdre with your family channel hat on, I guess, is license and merchandising important to you guys when you consider a project? Is it a must-have part of a concept? Or does it come later?
So easy, isn't it? No. And it depends on the origin of the IP. You look at companies like Moose that are spectacular in what they do, and Spin Master, if they're creating content that, you know, it doesn't mean they don't care about the quality of the content, but it comes from a different place. I mean, what have we always said? You know, build a hit, not a toy. It's so often most of the huge commercial successes over the last 10 years have been great shows that ended up building a fan base, and then the commercial programs come. It doesn't mean that there isn't value in that, but it's certainly not something that should be the starting point unless you are actually in that business. Though I always think it's quite reasonable to give people participation, because then they've got skin in the game and they're more likely to support your show on their platforms. But that's just a little hint.
It's a very valid, subtle as a sledgehammer hint, Deirdre.
Seriously, it always works.
And I hear you. I do hear you. I think that's something that producers do have to perhaps have a mind shift on and go, you know, let's have a united front. Let's be in this together. Let's make this work. Partnerships. Jane, how about Disney? Is it a focal point initially, or does it come later?
Look, I think everything that Deirdre just said applies. It is not a must-have, right? Provoking emotions, stories with heart, characters that resonate, first and foremost. But if there is a piece that's in development or that we're looking at that looks like it has potential for franchise, I don't think it's any secret that we won't hesitate to lean into that and right during the development piece of that content, lean in with, you know, what our consumer products team would call the show to shelf approach, right? See it, play it, get it.
And you are the franchise masters, I have to say.
We have been very fortunate. But yeah, the stories and characters come first. But like I said, if there's an opportunity there, we won't hesitate to lean in and be very deliberate.
This is the most polite group, by the way. The best behaved Zoom
ABC
call
commercial
ever.
used to have or be involved with the ABC stores.
Yes. Well, we don't have a show to shelf strategy, of course. But we did. We had a very successful retail business, and I think that in terms of brand engagement and extension of audience, there is no better, you know, circle of life than having the show, the product, the retail outlet, and that worked really well for us at the ABC. And it was a real shame that we closed those stores, the final stores in 2016, and then our online store a couple of years ago. But that doesn't stop the presence of ABC, kids' toys and merchandise in retail. Play School is still very much a success story for us, but of course the show would always come first. We have very strict, and Deirdre would know, very strict editorial guidelines around a program certainly having its purpose for creative of show, not toy and merchandise. But Giggle and Hoot's a great example, where that extension through the toys, the books, the puzzles, the pajamas, it's fantastic. And the Wiggles themselves do a great job in that way. And touring is certainly a huge part of that for them. And there's nothing more exciting, for me to be sitting in an audience full of Wiggles fans and seeing them really engage in that way. And I think that's fantastic. But at the ABC, we do operate slightly differently. And look, globally where we can, if we were to get Play School up and running internationally, I would love to see, something quite exciting and ambitious happening overseas. But and we're always working with various partners. But the closing of stores had a big impact to us. There's no doubt about that, across all categories for product for ABC Kids. So it was a real shame.
It
But
was.
there's still
Play School,
opportunity.
Jess.
What's that?
Let's talk Play School.
I know. Let's do it. We will.
Sorry,
Absolutely.
Donna.
You
Very
hear?
exciting.
No, that's okay.
Let's do the
Heard it
deal
here
now
first.
on the session.
Live deal making session.
I'm going to get in so much trouble.
Oh my God. Our audience would love that. They would love
Can
that.
you imagine?
Oh dear. That's very funny.
Sorry.
That is too funny. No, it's great. Have a chat later. So one sort of tricky question about consumer products. Considering that a lot of our content is going to the streaming platforms these days, how do you think we achieve getting consumer products out there when so many of the SWODs are reluctant to share their audience data, and that's considered a big part of your pitch to pursue consumer products? Any words of wisdom in that?
Well, you have to launch your own Disney Plus platform then, don't you? And then that circumvents the whole problem.
Yeah,
No,
I've got a jar
I'll
of
let
coins
someone else
here,
answer that
could help.
question.
This is actually something we've been working on a lot, obviously, because of our sort of omni-platform approach and the strength in ABOT that we have. So my advice would be to have a very clear strategy about how you would want to build reach before you even go into a negotiation with any partner. Because I think if you can articulate that and as part of that process, almost educate the licensing industry as well about what you plan to do, you're going to be in a much better position than trying to do it retrospectively. And it can involve parallel content production paths, all sorts of things. But if you know what you need to do to build reach, then you won't be reliant on your primary platform.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think distribution and exposure matter, particularly for these young audiences. I may be saying something sacrilegious, so if you never hear from me again, it was this statement that did it. But exclusivity does not matter to a child, right?
Yeah, you're also in trouble now.
Yeah, no, I'm fine. But the more places they see it, for instance, on Disney channels and on Disney Plus and on Disney YouTube, the more platforms, the better it is. And but I also think this will be a conversation that's needed to be had with, to your point, the licensors and the retailers that are going to really change the way this conversation happens.
It is. It's a shift because we've been so reliant on having ratings and audience numbers as part of our presentations, and it just doesn't work that way anymore. So it is, I guess, an educational process and something that we as producers are going to have to instigate.
Yeah, look, and not to go back to it, but if your partners have some participation in that, they're going to be more likely to sit at the table with you and figure it out. Yeah, definitely. Well, we started talking about deals just a minute or two ago. Dollars and deals.
Rather than between
Doodles
you
are
guys
doodles.
on the panel, Jane and Deirdre, how best do you see your companies working with Australian producers? Is it via commissions, acquisitions, co-productions? Considering our audience is a bunch of producers, how do you see us best working with you guys moving forward? Jane, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, look, the good and bad answer is yes, right? to all of those suggestions of and options, and really, you know, it's we are trying to make the most and best content we can with the number of slots that we have and the budgets that we have, and looking to great creative partners that can also make our dollars go further. Is a very attractive conversation to have, which, you know, circles back to where we were earlier about that package deal. That it would be all three of those ways of being involved and partnering with the Australian community.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we can knock on your door or your colleagues at a variety of stages, with regards to our projects, whether it's early stages looking for that initial partnership, or whether it's further down the track when we're up and running. And Deirdre, are you in a similar situation?
Yeah, so I think it's the acquisition of rights. So that could be distribution support, or it could be television acquisition rights. Co-production, we've talked about this, Donna, but I'm trying to sort of put forward this idea of enhanced service, because I think people internationally, sometimes service relationships deepen into creative partnerships around IP, original IP. I think people think of it as being a factory, an outsourcing function, but if they're looking for people who can actually bring both local support and creative guidance to a service relationship, I think that's something that hasn't really been done out of traditional territories like Australia. So I think there's something in that. I haven't quite cracked it yet, but I think, you know, even as a group of producers that can provide creative guidance and editorial guidance, not just service animation particularly, would be great. We're such an interesting company now because we have so many different entry points. So the way I'm trying to sort of advise people to think about it is these conversations can be production, IP, or platform led. So, you know, I can act obviously as a point of contact as the Australian within the Wildbrain company. I can help guide people through that because we do approach things very holistically these days. But yeah, the answer to that is yes.
Yes.
Like Jen said, yes, yes.
Jess, what about from your point of view, from a distributor's point of view? Do you like to get involved early, or would you rather see a project further down the track? And do you get involved in distribution advances and bits and pieces like that?
Oh, we do everything here at the ABC. Look, I think, you know, the best model for us, and it always has been, is that we work very closely with the producers and the ABC commissioners. We put in a significant DA into certain projects, try and secure pre-sales and go then launch to Mick Junior and sell around the world. But the reality is that doesn't happen on every single project. So we need to be very open and flexible about the way that we are involved. And it could be, you know, me brokering a co-production deal with Netflix or another broadcaster, or a straight 100% sort of investment into a show like The Wiggles. So we actually represent The Wiggles globally, and I sell back to the ABC. So I mean, there's many different ways that ABC commercial can come into shows, but we love working with producers at all different stages of development and production. And for us, you know, Itch was a great model where we sort of put in very early and started working with broadcasters around getting life of series commitments, which meant they wanted to be creatively involved. And so how do you navigate that when the ABC's sort of commissioning and has very strict editorial guidelines, but we need to be introducing some other creative options into the show. So there, you know, you have to be flexible. And if you haven't already, you know, tried to diversify your business, then you're probably going to really struggle as a distributor, I think.
Yes, because your sands are shifting at the moment. very much. So you're right. We have to be able to be flexible, and it's the same on the producing side. We, you know, our old models are out the window. How we put together our financing, how we bring a project to life. It's a new world, and we all have to be able to not only accommodate that, but get on the front foot with it. We talked a little bit earlier about. Deidre mentioned subsidies on tax offsets. So let's talk about what's happening in Australia at the moment. And I'm guessing Jane and Deirdre are up to date, but I'll give you a 20-second update. So we're harmonising our producer offset, and we'll soon have 30% for TV and SVOD. So that's gone up from 20% for the producer tax offset. We also have the Pdv offset, which is post visual effects digital offset, and it's used a lot in animation. That also sits at 30%. You have one or the other, not both. Recently, some of the states have come forward with a 10% Pdv on spend in their territory. So in certain cases, that's allowing producers to secure up to 40% of Pdv for a project, which is pretty exciting with that mix of federal and state money. So do you look at what those tax offsets are? And I know, Deirdre, from your point of view, you said it is really important. Will it be a deal breaker for you if the Australian producer can bring a certain amount of tax offset to a project?
Yes. No, I mean, it's interesting. It's. I don't want to give the impression that it's all about money that can be taken out of Australia, because it's not. There's the editorial part of it is just as important. If a great project comes our way, and in my past experiences, people look at, wow, look at the percentage of budget they can bring, but they also look at the commissioning partner. With a platform. So it's a combination of both, because if you know it's a show coming from Libby at the ABC, you know you have a very good sense of the care, time and attention that would be attached to that. So it's a combination of both, you know, the producer, the platform, and the incredible support that comes with that at a government level.
As you know, right now we are in discussions with the government about this, because our pathway to market in Australia has been significantly reduced, and ABC is really our only local on the ground that is commissioning children's content. So yeah, we are in heavy discussions with them about accessing these offsets, because we are required to have a pathway to market here in Australia to be able to access them. It is a tricky time.
And that's a huge concern, and there's a lot of Canadian experience that relates directly to this, because if you have the burden of holding up a creative industry that is so important to Australia and the world, and to Australian kids, I might add, more important than anything, to put that burden on one free-to-air network with funding challenges that, of course, you know, break my heart, but it's like, that's too great a burden. Can't have one path to market to be able to then move out to your international partners and say, you know, it feels like we haven't really evolved with the audience in some way.
Yeah.
Sorry for putting my flag in the sand.
I appreciate it. We're obviously in discussions and lobbying hard for considerations to be made to open up these things. So it's integral to the survival of the children's industry in Australia.
I mean, jumping on the soapbox, but it's crushing, right? It's crushing to a creative community and to an audience that both desperately need this to be as healthy and as vital as possible. And you've all, you know, we've all been part of the benefits of when these things take off, and what comes back to the country in terms of culture and pride and the ability to take even more risks. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's just essential that there's more opportunities made available.
And we are, you know, the kids community here has always been focused not solely on our audience here, but on our global audience. We've always, I think Deirdre alluded to it earlier, we've always travelled to raise finance because we've always needed to get finance from elsewhere, which means we've always been making shows, not just for our own audience here, but for the global market. And we've been doing this for 30 years in that sense. So we are export businesses. And that's important. That's important, you know, as an industry. As an independent industry, we hire thousands and thousands of people. And I think we fly under the radar. So
yes, you do.
Yeah,
we need to make more noise about it. I agree. And I know people work very hard to do that, but particularly with the changes, it's very lucky when you have Australians sitting within organisations that can communicate what's going on. I see that as part of my role, but it is interesting in another territory, a recent discussion where there isn't a significant kids audience in one place. If you have a reach metric connected to funding, we can actually achieve that through a YouTube platform. So, you know, there is a way of reaching the audience that doesn't necessarily follow the traditional paths.
Yeah. It's back to that shifting sands and how progressive we all have to be. Deirdre, while we're talking about sort of new ways of doing things, do you want to tell us a little bit about Wildbrain Spark?
Wildbrain Spark, I love it. A very special part of our organisation. I won't go on about it too much because I've learnt so much, particularly in the last year of being in this role, about what they do. So for those of you who may not know, though you probably do, they're a leading AVOD network for kids on YouTube and also off YouTube, but increasingly, but on YouTube. So they're really experts. This young dynamic team based in the UK are experts in optimization and digital content creation. When you do get a chance to see and dig into what they do, it is quite extraordinary. As a company, and everybody was in this situation, the Made for Kids changes in January last year were pretty crippling because this was a part of our industry that was flush with cash, and money means investment in content and experimentation. And so I think the realities of a changed business model really hit everybody, and Spark is like everybody else. That was a challenge. Very proud of the way they've diversified their revenues. We've set up direct ad sales business now in the UK and the US and Europe. So everything is in a very good place. But the one thing they understand is everything that I never probably did and thought I did when I was a traditional broadcaster. So it's just the power of what they do. It's not necessarily about having a single hit on YouTube or one or two. It's about the diversity and variety of their channels. So they have over 850 channels now. And the information insight that gives you and how you understand how kids move through this universe that is YouTube, it's a fascinating part of the company. I often say it's our secret ingredient, but you know, if they can drag me into the future, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. We love them dearly.
And speaking about the future, Deirdre, there are some changes happening in Canada. I believe you're introducing an SVOD quota that could bring up to about 800 million into the screen sector. Do you think this is the way forward for territories outside of the US to ensure that we still have a voice and that our stories are shared?
And I'm going to be very careful not to pass comment necessarily on the Butler recommendations and how this is going to roll out. But, you know, I am an advocate for increased content investment wherever it comes from, and a level of equity across people that work within the system and those that don't. It's interesting, my first Canadian experience when I landed there in 2016 after leaving home, my timing wasn't particularly good because it you know, very healthy industry, obviously a well-established partner of Australian producers in the kids space. Effectively, the kids commissioners in that business stopped spending money. So the sector hit a wall, and then it was up to regulation and the funding bodies to adapt and evolve to keep everybody going. And it wasn't about just keeping businesses alive. It was actually the entire creative voice of a nation lost its mechanism. So it wasn't the talent, it wasn't the ideas, it was just the mechanic of how they access funding to keep this wonderful industry alive. And the great thing we have seen is the diversification into other genres. They found new partners. They are also great all-rounders in Canada, so they found new ways of working. They did rely very much on service, which is always a risk, but it is the advantage of being very close to the US and having well-established paths there. So the burden came back onto service, and now you're starting to see original IP come back again and thrive again. So that's how the sector survived, but the scale of it, it is significant due to the location and the nature of Canadian life. I do think any increased investment and a levelling of the playing field is only going to make it stronger. Move over Schitt's Creek. There's going to be Canadian, Australian co-production hits coming through with a vengeance. So yes, I absolutely am. It'll be really interesting the next 12 months. I know Matt Dina and the team are staying very close to what's happening in Canada, and I think it will be an indication in the same way that Australia taking on some of the digital giants and perhaps losing Google search is another thing that we're watching very carefully, because it's a precedent setting position. So that was a very long-winded way of saying yes.
But I like your answer, Deirdre. Yes. Yes. Listen, I'm getting a wind up, so I'm going to ask one last quick question to you all. Just tell me, what are you looking for at the moment? Do you think you might find it in Australia? Jane, do you want to kick off?
I mean, the good news is that the ask has not shifted, right? It's the nuance around it. We are evolving, not revolving, in what it is that we're seeking to represent with our audience and with the content that we're looking to represent them with. So it is that classic heart and humor, right? That ability to I think layer in, which is most important to us right now, that ability to have our audience feel seen and heard. And it is looking for a real depth of character that allows that layering to happen beyond just the heart and humor piece. So that applies across all our ages. Our business is changing just as yours is, and Disney is evolving, and we're changing into Disney branded television, which means we are across many demos across that group, which is new, right? Including a big dive into unscripted, which will be again a new take there. But so really embracing the kids and family piece of this, with an eye to continuing to offer that very bespoke, particular preschool and kid point of view, and then figuring out what the family piece is as well. So kind of a convoluted answer of expanding dynamics and demographics needing to be represented in what we're looking for.
Jess, how about you?
Well, I think following the success we've had in that kind of sort of older primary sort of more action scripted drama, definitely keen to see more of that. I think we're looking for strong storylines. I talked earlier about the authentic voices. That's going to be really important for us, both from a commercial perspective at the ABC, but also on the commissioning side, and high production values. But I would also love to see another preschool animation that we can represent, really looking to get further into those non-English speaking markets. I think we have a lot of live action, that's great, but really keen to see some new preschool, more upper preschool animated series, universal themes, a bit of humour, but we're very open to all types of projects. So come and knock us down, and we'll have a chat.
Great. And Deirdre?
I feel like I've talked too much. Great partners and ideas. Exactly what Jane and Jess are saying.
Well, I am very grateful for the three of you joining me today. So I'm going to say to our audience at home, thank you to our incredible panel, Deidre Brennan, Jessica Ellis and Jane Gould. We'd also like to thank the Australian Children's Television Foundation for supporting this session, and Screen Producers Australia and the terrific team that have been organising Screen Forever. So thank you very much, everyone, and hopefully I'll see you in person soon.
Soon.
We can only hope.
Cheers.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you.